Hello, it's the Mega Movie Man here. Welcome to my top 3 movies of 2023. This has been a great year for cinema. So many box office hits. At number 3 is Blue Beetle. This is one of the best superhero movies of all time. It's just a good time. My only problem with it is a severe lack of white people. How am I supposed to relate to a character that isn't a fat white guy that loves wiener in their ass? And number 2 is The Sound of Freedom. If you don't watch this movie, you're a pedophile. And at number 1 is Oppenheimer. Christopher Nolan has done it again. Isn't it crazy that a 3-hour rated R biopic made $1 billion at the box office? Why hasn't anybody pointed this out? Are you guys stupid or something? Okay. Enough of this shit. I'm sounding like Dr. Skipper with all this yapping. In the first part of this video, I'm going to talk about my favorite movies of the year. In the second part, I'm going to talk about everything else that I saw. I know some people are going to ask, well, where's this movie? Where's this movie? Where's this movie? I saw as many movies as I can, so here we go. Very first on the list is Saw X. I already know people are confused about why this is on the list. If you look at Saw X objectively, it's probably not that good of a movie, but I think it really works as a Saw movie. Every entry in the series is basically the same. There's the A plot with all the traps and stuff, then there's a B plot with the cops, then the movie ends with a twist. That structure really works because most of the Saw movies have really creative and interesting traps. It's also really funny to see what stupid twist they're gonna do. I'd be kind of dumb to expect anything else. Saw X gave me everything I wanted as a Saw fan. Really gruesome traps, even if they are totally unfair. Like, how do you expect this lady to cut off her leg, then suck the blood out? It was nice to see Hoffman back. Tobin Bell is really good in it, but there's some really cool stuff that I would never expect to see in a Saw movie. First of all, I actually sided with Jigsaw. In the other movies, he put people in traps that don't really deserve it, like a grieving father or that smoker. In Saw X, I have no sympathy for his victims. They are assholes who pretend to cure sick people. It made the movie way more entertaining. I really love Cecilia. She was a great over-the-top villain. Her back and forth with John Kramer was really funny because she has no problems murdering people, but Jigsaw doesn't see himself as a murderer, so he's just horrified by her. We've never really seen Jigsaw in that state, so it was interesting to me. I really love the editing style. It does a great job at showing someone's mental state when they're in a trap. There's a million things going on in their mind and they don't know what to do. Of course it has issues. There's a ton of things that make no sense, but it didn't ruin the movie for me. At this point, it's very normal for Saw. This was a giant return to form for the series. Next up, we got Thanksgiving, the new horror film by Eli Roth. I usually don't like movies from him. I've seen The Green Inferno and parts of Hostel. Those movies take themselves way too seriously. This movie had a bit of self-awareness. It's a dumb, fun slasher that doesn't pretend to be anything else. I love the opening scene. It's this big massacre on Black Friday. It was super hilarious. All the kills are really creative and gory. Sometimes they defy the laws of physics. I appreciate that it doesn't drag on for way too long. It's an entertaining slasher, nothing more, nothing less. When Evil Lurks. Speaking of gory movies, this is one of the most disturbing films I've ever seen. Whenever something violent happens, it goes on for a very long time. What really elevates those parts is the build up to them. A big chunk of the runtime is dedicated to developing these characters. The only issue I really have is some of the bad editing. Then we got the dark, sad life of Boogie 298. I know some people won't consider this a movie, but I'm pretty sure if it's 40 minutes, it counts as a film. It follows Stephen I Never Did Williams.
I never did. I never did. I never did. But I didn't.
First of all, this documentary is so well made. It feels like something you would find on Netflix. I appreciate how it comes from a sympathetic perspective. When you see videos about fallen YouTube figures, it feels like they aren't even treated like humans. But with this approach, it reminds you that Boogie is a real person, and you can really understand why he's a gigantic piece of shit. He's probably my least favorite YouTuber of all time. There's only like 2 people that are worse than him. It's clear he made this documentary to garner sympathy, but it's really hard to feel bad for someone who complains about being fat while eating fast food. I wish this documentary gave more context for people who may not know about Boogie. Even with that, it was great. Then I got Priscilla. This movie is about Elvis and Priscilla Presley's relationship relationship. Everyone knows by now that Elvis groomed her. He was 24 and she was 14 when they met. I believe this is adapted from Priscilla's memoirs, so it's purely from her perspective. I think that really enhanced the movie because you got a clear idea of her mental state. Of course, at the very beginning, she believes that Elvis actually cares about her. She doesn't have enough life experience to realize what's actually going on. As the film continues, she realizes that Elvis isn't the person he pretends to be. It explores the kind of strength you need to leave those relationships. All of that was explored in a very mature and honest way. My only issue is that there was no structure, basically. It kind of felt like scenes stitched together with no connective tissue, but it did not ruin the movie. I still really loved it. Next up, I got May December. This is about an actress named Elizabeth, played by Natalie Portman, meeting a woman named Gracie, played by Julianne Moore, because Elizabeth is going to play Gracie in a movie about her life, specifically about her problematic relationship. Gracie met her husband when he was 14 and she was 36. I love this movie. First of all, Charles Melton is so good. He gives a very vulnerable, heartbreaking performance. There's one scene in the movie that really blew me away. He basically realizes that he was groomed. I think it's really effective to me because that's what real victims experience. They could be in denial for a very long time. Also, a big part of this movie is how it basically criticizes Hollywood for exploiting other people's trauma just so they can make it into disposable content. The cinematography is supposed to mimic something you would see on the Lifetime channel. My only issue is that they spam the same song millions of times. There is a purpose to it. It is also used to mock stuff from the Lifetime channel, but I already got the point, so it became very repetitive after a while. Despite that, it was still great. Next up is Killers of the Flower Moon. First of all, Leonardo DiCaprio is really great. This is probably one of the most unlikable characters he's ever played. He is a pathetic, money-hungry bastard. Of course, the standout performance is Lily Gladstone. A lot of people criticize this movie's runtime. I honestly think that's valid. I was very bored for the first hour, but later on I got into it. Honestly, it just became really depressing because it shows how many tragedies there are that are completely forgotten or made into shallow entertainment. This isn't one of my favorite Scorsese movies, but I still really loved it. Next up is The Boy and the Heron. Most people would have this at the top of their lists, but what really holds this movie back is the main character. He isn't bad or anything, just nothing really stood out to me about his character. What I love about Studio Ghibli movies is how much downtime you spend with the characters. Like in Princess Mononoke, there's so much time developing Ashitaka's and Princess Mononoke's clashing worldviews. Princess Mononoke wants to kill all humans, and Ashitaka really cares about peace. That's a really interesting dynamic. By the end of the movie, I really cared about both characters. That exact element was missing for me in this. Whenever the movie slowed down, I got really bored. None of the emotional payoffs really affected me. What I really love about this movie is the world. It feels like there's tons of history to it. There was so many details and little creatures in the background. I honestly can't wait to rewatch this just to appreciate all the little details. Next up is Bottoms, probably one of my favorite comedies of the year. I was annoyed at first, but later on I got used to the humor. There's tons of great, likable, fun characters. It explores how teenagers obsess over their social status in high school. That's something I dealt with, but later on in life, I realized how stupid that was, so I related to this movie a lot. Then we got Past Lives. This movie has a pretty familiar narrative. There's a lot of films where the whole conflict is will they or won't they. What makes this stand out is how deep the characters are. Both of them have their own unique passions that set them on different life paths. Unfortunately, they don't really connect. Sometimes that happens in life. You can really care about someone, but they won't feel the same way. Nothing ever feels over dramatic or corny. This isn't breaking new ground or anything, but it's really well done. Then we got Barbie. First of all, this movie is hilarious. There's tons of great comedy with the dialogue, but there's also some fun visual gags. The set design is pretty incredible. There's a lot of attention to detail. The Barbie world feels very fleshed out. My biggest flaw with this movie is that it's not very subtle. Sometimes this movie just tells you what the themes are. A lot of people try to justify it. They say it has to be that way because men wouldn't get it, which makes no sense because audiences aren't stupid. Despite that, this film was so much fun. Next up, we got Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Just to get the obvious out of the way, this movie has incredible animation. Unlike most superhero movies, it has a great sense of humor. A lot of the jokes that Miles tells are very awkward and stilted, which makes tons of sense given the fact that he's a kid, it makes his character a lot more relatable because he's not going to deal with every situation perfectly. The funniest bits are just some of the line delivery.
Spider-Man, why did you create that guy?
I didn't.
There is never a moment where the story stops in service of telling a lame joke. It just flows very naturally. I loved where they took Miles. He faces typical Spider-Man troubles, like attempting to balance your family life with being a superhero. It sucks because Miles actually wants to do some good, but his parents believe he doesn't even care about them. I understood where everybody was coming from. I loved every villain. The Spot is awesome. Sometimes he's really hilarious, but other times he's scary as shit. Miguel O'Hara was a great character. I understood why he's so hell-bent on protecting the multiverse. He is responsible for wiping out an entire universe. I also understood where Miles was coming from. Even if his decision is a bit selfish, his dad made him feel a sense of belonging, which is something he wanted from the Spider Society, but Miguel completely shut him out.
You don't belong here. You never did.
This movie allows people to come to their own conclusion. For me personally, it's what makes the story great. I really can't wait to see the second half. Next up, we got Mutant Mayhem. Speaking of Spider-Verse animation, I really love how this movie looks. Every single character is ugly in a good way. It really fits the grimy, disgusting city that everybody lives in. This is my all-time favorite version of the Turtles. They actually sound like kids. Their jokes are very juvenile and stupid. Whenever an internet term comes out of their mouth, it never feels like a lame joke, just a natural part of their language. My only issue was the villain. Superfly is an entertaining character, but I felt like his motivations were really bland. He has the same plan as Lizard from TASM 1. They both just want to turn people into monsters. All of the other characters feel super original, but it seems like they just skimped out on the villain. Other than that, I love this movie. Then we got David Fincher's The Killer. This might seem weird, but I saw this entire movie as a comedy for the reason that the main character talks about how much of a skilled assassin he is. The guy has this super detailed routine, all of this shit, only for him to miss is really hilarious. It's a great subversion of what you see in these kinds of movies, especially with ones about assassins. I kind of felt like it was David Fincher poking fun at his own perfectionist mindset. The sound design is pretty great because you can feel the impact of every hit. My only issue was with the main character's family life. You only see the people he cares about for like 5 minutes. I barely know anything about these people, so I wasn't able to care for those characters like the film wanted me to. Doesn't ruin it, but I think it's worth mentioning. This is an awesome, simple thriller that's elevated by David Fincher's directing. Next up on my list is Godzilla -1. It's so refreshing to see a Godzilla movie with good human characters. They are interesting and have flaws they need to overcome, so whenever Godzilla pops up, I'm actually invested in what happens. This movie feels like Jaws in a way, where every time the creature comes in, there's a lot of build up and you never know what it's gonna do next. It seems like every new way they try to kill it doesn't work. It creates this great rising tension, making the movie actually entertaining. While I do love the final scene, the conclusion to the main character kind of felt like a cop-out. I'm not gonna spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, but those who have will understand what I mean. Despite that, this is literally my favorite Godzilla movie ever made. Next up is Talk to Me, probably my favorite horror movie of the year. This is really well made, especially the opening scene. It's all in one take with tons of extras, and it perfectly sets the tone. Characters are pretty great all around. The main girl does a lot of selfish things, but for me personally, it made sense. She does pay consequences for it. This film is effective most of the time, but some scenes are unintentionally funny. Even with that, Talk to Me is still great. Next up, we got Missing, the most underrated movie of the year. The whole story is seen through a laptop. Usually films like this suck because they use the idea in the laziest way possible, but Missing uses this idea to its fullest advantage. My only issue is that the music sucks. It literally sounds like royalty-free shit, so it took the punch out of some of the emotional beats. Honestly, those scenes would have been better without music, just so I can absorb the moment. Despite that issue, this movie is still great. Next up on the list is Air, one of the best dad movies of all time. There's a lot of scenes with experts talking about their field. It's written in such a way where you can understand what they're talking about, and it's really entertaining. This is probably one of the funniest movies I've seen all year.
I will fucking take your nuts and fucking eat them, I will eat your fucking nuts!
This isn't super revolutionary or anything, but I was really entertained. Next up is How to Blow Up a Pipeline. This movie is about a few protesters blowing up a pipeline to hopefully bring change to the climate crisis in America. It's very inspired by the Safdie brothers in terms of cinematography, tons of handheld shots, uncomfortable close-ups. It makes you feel like you're in the chaos. It added another level of tension. The motivation of every character makes sense. They all had their life ruined in some way due to the climate crisis. Their voices haven't been heard, so they go to very drastic measures to create change. The movie never justifies their actions. It heavily shows how flawed they are. There's one character that really stood out to me. At first you can get behind your motivation, but as the movie goes on, it becomes very clear she's only doing this for her own ego. People like this actually exist. Those people do nothing but hold us back from making a difference. All of this was presented in a very realistic way. I only have a few nitpicks. Like, one of the characters has a video series on TikTok where he makes homemade bombs. First of all, you would get banned immediately. TikTok bans people just for having unpopular opinions. Second of all, you would get arrested. That was like my only issue. I still think this movie is incredible. Next up, we got Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, the last good MCU movie we will ever get. It was a great conclusion to all these characters. This movie has a few issues because it was so focused on Rocket and getting from one place to another. Some parts of the character arcs felt underdeveloped. Star-Lord wanting to see his actual father again felt out of nowhere. Like, they do mention it a bit earlier in the movie. I just wish they developed his desire to go see his dad again, just so that reunion could have hit more emotionally. But everything else going on with him was great. His scenes with Gamora were well done. They didn't just get back together in a cliche way. Star-Lord finally got his chance to say goodbye. Rocket's backstory was very emotional. I was able to care about Rocket's friends in a short amount of time. The High Evolutionary is an excellent villain. Like, whenever he grabbed Rocket's head, it made me so uncomfortable. The action is pretty great, especially the hallway fight. It's nice to see a superhero movie where the director actually has a vision. I was super satisfied with this movie. Next up is American Fiction. This is about a writer named Monk who writes a book that's a stereotypical version of the Black experience. It actually becomes super popular, so he has to deal with it. This movie was awesome. It's a huge satire on how Hollywood exploits Black artists. There is an amazing scene where they show a TV station called Black Stories. The whole thing is only gang members or slavery. It's a funny way to show how Hollywood reduces the Black experience to the most surface level pandering bullshit. They only care about the Black stories that will make them the most profit. This resonated with me so much because there's so many artists out there who don't get heard because it doesn't fit in the soulless bullshit that executives want. Monk's whole dilemma is that he became successful off a story that isn't him. This made me sad because I love movies where you get to know the filmmaker behind it. It's moving to see an artist talk about issues they've personally overcome. It just seems like mainstream Hollywood doesn't want that. They just want to put artists into these little boxes. Unfortunately, sometimes you have to sell your soul to get in the industry. My only issue is that one of the plot lines wasn't really wrapped up. If there was an extra 15 minutes, this movie would have been perfect. Next up is Poor Things. This is the new movie from Yorgos Lanthimos, one of the best working directors today. I really love his visual style. Tons of wide shots and fisheye lenses. It does a good job at making you uncomfortable. This movie has excellent world building. Honestly, I don't want to give too much away about this movie. Going in blind is the best experience possible, so check it out. Next up is Anatomy of a Fall. It's a courtroom drama about this woman who tries to prove her innocence after her husband dies. At first, you don't know anything about this couple, so initially I sided with this woman, but later on the film gives you more information about their marriage, and my perspective shifted. Honestly, by the end, I didn't know how to feel. This movie has so much respect for the audience. It presents facts and allows them to come to their own conclusion. It's a great commentary on how big court cases are handled. There's so many people involved with this trial that have their own agenda. It reminded me that most people don't care about the truth. The performances are great all around. I do have one little nitpick. Some of the zooms look really bad. It's not a big deal. This movie is still great. Next up is Red Rooms. Holy shit, this movie was awesome. It's about this serial killer on trial. He murdered a few girls and put videos of it on the deep web. We follow this woman who attends the trial. As the film goes on, she becomes more and more obsessed. There's one character that actually falls in love with the killer. She constantly makes excuses for why he didn't do it, even if there's tons of evidence against him. It's a really great commentary on our unhealthy obsession with serial killers and how that fascination only hurts victims in the end. I wish more people talk about this movie because I really love it. Next up is Blackberry, a new movie by Matt Johnson. His persona as a filmmaker is just him being a big film fan. In The Dirties, he plays a film bro school shooter. He plays a very similar character in Blackberry, just without the school shooter part. There's this running gag throughout the entire movie where he hosts movie nights instead of working. Glenn Howerton is great as well. His character feels like someone you would see in The Wolf of Wall Street. He's a sleazy business guy that knows nothing about the tech industry. At one point of the movie, the engineers tell him they can't sell any more Blackberries because it would literally crash the servers, but he just doesn't care. My favorite element was Jay Baruchel's arc. He starts off as someone who just wants to make great products for people, but later on he turns into the corporate monster that he hates. It's sad because you can actually tell he cared about consumers. Unfortunately, a lot of people in high positions get corrupted. It also talks about how people behind great achievements never get credit. Yeah, this movie was wonderful. It excels on every level. At number 5 is Dream Scenario. This movie's about a college professor played by Nicolas Cage popping up into people's dreams all over the world. This is my favorite Nick Cage performance. He plays this neurotic weirdo, but he makes the character so endearing. The dream sequences are incredible. Every single one has a different filming style, but they're also kind of funny because Nicolas Cage is just standing there in all of them. It's a great showcase on how sudden fame can affect people. Nick Cage first loves his newfound popularity, but when people start turning on him, he can't handle it. Not everybody is built for the things that come with fame. If you haven't seen this yet, please check it out. Then we got John Wick 4, the holy grail of action movies. Keanu Reeves is not that good of an actor, but he is so perfect for John Wick because he's a blank slate badass who doesn't talk. The action scenes are so good. Oh my god. There's tons of shit going on with a lot of extras. They are so well coordinated. I appreciate that John Wick isn't some invincible superhero. In every John Wick movie, he gets his ass whooped multiple times. I usually hate the world building in these films, but for John Wick 4, I was fully into it. It's because all the side characters, like Donnie Yen or that guy who looks like Gideon, are the ones who gave most of the exposition. Those two are awesome characters. They take what would otherwise be lame dialogue and elevate it to some of the most entertaining scenes in the movie. God, this is a masterpiece. I don't care what anyone says. Next up, we got Oppenheimer. Oh my god, Christopher Nolan, you piece of shit. I was fully expecting to not like this movie just because Chris Nolan can be really annoying. Also, most of the time his characters suck, but I was really blown away by this. First of all, the performances are incredible. Cillian Murphy is obviously the standout. I love scenes where the actor just conveys so many emotions at one time with just facial expressions. You can tell the character in that moment has so many things going on in their head. I know some people hate how this was edited, but for me it really worked. The only thing I can really knock is some of the sound mixing. At points, I couldn't hear what anybody said. Oppenheimer has so many layers to his character. I think he mostly wanted to create the atomic bomb to actually help his country, but he had all the serious implications of making it in the back of his mind. He was a huge coward and never wanted to face it, so when he does eventually have to confront those things, it destroys him. Honestly, I could talk about his character for hours. This movie was amazing, and by the way, it looks so fucking good on 4K. Number 2, we got The Holdovers. This is my favorite performance from Paul Giamatti since Shazam II.
I am killer!
Dominic Sessa also did a great job. His line deliveries are hilarious.
Hurry up, hurry! I am hurrying!
What makes this film so great is the dynamic between the two leads. Paul Giamatti is a stern hardass who is obsessed with holding up the rules, but Dominic Sessa is rebellious and almost has no respect for authority. A lot of great moments come from that, but on a deeper level, they are both broken, lonely people, so they find a lot of comfort in each other. Another thing I really love about their dynamic is how they learn from each other. There's one scene where Paul Giamatti sees Dominic Sessa talking to some girls and encourages him to talk to some guys around him. It doesn't go too well, but I really love this scene because he is so closed off from people for most of the movie. It was really nice to see him break out of his shell. When you personally have someone in your life that you care about, that person will push you to improve yourself. That's why it's important to build those connections. I really related to Dominic Sessa's character. There's a scene where he talks about how lonely he is due to pissing people off and he doesn't have any friends. When I was younger, I was the exact same way. I lashed out at people who didn't deserve it. I struggled to forgive myself, but watching watching someone in a film deal with the same issues that I have felt really comforting. Honestly, I can watch these two characters talk for hours. My favorite movie of the year was The Ironclaw. This movie is about the Von Erich brothers, who were a famous wrestling family, and it tells the story of how most of them passed away. It mainly focuses on the last surviving brother, Kevin Von Erich. To explain why I really connected with this movie, I have to get personal. I recently lost a close family member, and this film does a great job at showing what it feels like to lose someone. Not only does someone you love exit your life, but it also feels like you lose a part of yourself. That's why the line, "I'm not a brother anymore," really affected me. Also, growing up with a brother that you really look up to made this film painful to watch. Because when you have a brother, there's this inherent desire to always want to protect them and be there for that person when they're going through a really hard time, and all you want to do is take that pain away from them. I really adored this movie. Okay, now on to everything else. At number 80, I got Knock at the Cabin. People love to say that M. Night Shyamalan made a comeback. No, he didn't. His movies are still really bad. I hated every single second of this movie. The dialogue is awful. The characters suck because you barely get to know them. It seems like he's really proud of this movie, and good for him, but it did not work for me. Next up is The Dial of Destiny. What a colossal piece of shit. I'm gonna make a very long YouTube video about this one day. I don't know when, I don't know where, but it's gonna happen. Next up is Rebel Moon. Zack Snyder claims to care so much about his visuals, but there are so many shots in this film that look like complete shit. Every single character is boring. This was a miserable nightmare. Then we got Exorcist Believer. So they got the guy who ruined Halloween. Now he ruined The Exorcist. This movie was awful. It seems like everybody behind this movie didn't understand the original. Then we got Megan, another crappy horror movie. The kills are so tame. It takes itself way too seriously. Most of this movie is a really sappy drama. I hated it. And number 75 is Strays. The only joke is haha, the dog said fuck. It's complete cancer. Then we got 65. This movie has a pretty big budget, but it looks so cheap. Not even Adam Driver can save it. Then we got Fast X. What do you expect from this franchise anymore? It's been awful for a very long time. The action makes no sense. Vin Diesel has no charisma. The only thing I liked was Jason Momoa. You can tell he's having so much fun. And number 72 is The Flash. What a giant train wreck. Ezra Miller is not a good actor. They are so annoying because they try way too hard to be funny. The action is complete ass. The cameos are completely disrespectful. Like, this is one of the worst scenes I've ever seen in a superhero movie. I'm glad the DC universe is dead. And number 71 is The Little Mermaid. Halle Bailey did a really great job. At number 70 is Ant-Man 3. It feels completely pointless. I guess the only purpose of this movie was to set up Kang, but holy crap, they did a really bad job. He is such a bland villain. He's no different than Apocalypse. Next up is Transformers Rise of the Beasts. It's not awful like the other movies in the series, but it's so bland, I don't remember a single thing about it. Next up is SpiderMan Lotus. There's this scene that really confused me. It's when Spider-Man calls Miles Morales one of them. Like, why was that there? This movie is really pretentious. Like, they thought this was a super powerful drama, but it's actually complete ass. And number 67 is No Hard Feelings. Pretty lame comedy. Feels like something you would see in the early 2000s. And number 66 is Blue Beetle. There's some things I actually like about this movie. The family dynamic was pretty okay. The main character is likable, but overall, this is a really bland movie. Number 65 is No One Will Save You. Caitlin Dever was good in it, I guess, but that's it. That's all I liked. Number 64 is Silent Night. What a huge disappointment. An action movie with no dialogue directed by John Woo sounds great. The action is so uninspired and lazy. There's a complete overuse of slow motion. Next up, we got Skinnamarink. This would have been way better as a short film. There's some creepy moments, but it went on for way too long. Next up is Nimona, a very forgettable animated movie. I did not like the animation style. Yeah, this was kind of bad. Next up is Totally Killer, one of the lamest slashers I've seen in a long time. Don't even bother with this. Number 60 is Infinity Pool. Mia Goth was really great in this movie. There's some cool cool ideas and effective scenes, but it went on for way too long. At number 59 is The Marvels. I like the three main characters, but everything else is so lame and cookie cutter, especially the villain. Number 58 is Five Nights at Freddy's. I will give this movie some credit. It's actually well shot. Mike Schmidt was a decent character, but overall it's a very okay horror movie. At number 57, I put Plain. I hate to use this phrase, but to really enjoy this movie, you gotta turn your brain off. It's a dumb, fun, simple action movie. Next up is Leave the World Behind. I was really disappointed by this movie. It was directed by Sam Esmail, the guy who made Mr. Robot, one of the best shows ever made, but it's very unsubtle about its political themes. Number 55 is Next Goal Wins. This was so lame. It didn't even feel like a Taika Waititi movie. It really had no heart, which is disappointing, especially when you look at Taika Waititi's other movies. Number 54 is The Marsh King's Daughter. I don't care. Number 53 is Elemental, another piece of Pixar content. This movie was so generic. The animation is okay, I guess, but overall it's a very disposable movie. Number 52 is Asteroid City. I know a lot of people love this movie, but I couldn't stand it. The cinematography is really great, but for me it felt super repetitive. Number 51 is Cocaine Bear. You could have done so much with this idea, but they decided to make a really lame comedy. Number 50 is The Sound of Freedom. I'm pretty sure everybody was guilt tripped into watching this movie. It's fine, but it doesn't have much to say about the issue. This was nothing special. Number 49 is Saltburn. Initially, I really loved this movie, but honestly, the more I think about it, the less I like about it. Number 48 is Creed 3. This has some of the best fight scenes in the entire series. They're really well directed, but for me, it was missing the heart of the other Rocky movies. Number 47 is Evil Dead Rise. This movie has some really great and creative kills. The characters are likable. Number 46 is the Mario movie. The animation was pretty great. I actually love the action scenes. The voice acting is pretty great for the most part, but whenever it tries to hook you emotionally, it is so embarrassing. I had fun with this, but I will never watch it again. Number 45 is Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. It was a pretty good drama, but I struggle to remember anything about it. Number 44 is Dungeons and Dragons. Honestly, this was a huge surprise. The action scenes were actually really good. It turned into a heist movie at the end. The characters are super likable and fun. I really wish I watched this in a theater. Number 43 is Gran Turismo. It's a fun sports movie, nothing more, nothing less. Number 42 is Wonka. Timothée Chalamet did a great job. I loved all the musical numbers, but a lot of the emotional moments felt very unearned. The characters aren't developed enough for me to really care. Number 41 is Flamin Hot. I'm aware that this story is complete bullshit, but if you watch it as a typical rags to riches story, you'll probably really like it. Number 40 is Cobweb. I enjoyed most of this movie. There was a decent mystery to it. Anthony Starr was really great, but I thought Lizzie Kaplan was really bad. She did not fit her character at all. It kind of fell apart at the end because it became a generic monster movie, but it's still okay. Number 39 is Inside. Willem Dafoe is great as always, but it became super repetitive after a while. Next up is The Creator. This is one of the best looking movies I've ever seen, but it's painfully generic. But overall, I still think it's worth watching. Number 37 is The Covenant. This was a decent war action movie. Number 36 is Tetris. I actually had a lot of fun with this movie. There were some cool action scenes and nice stylistic choices. Number 35 is Beau is Afraid. Joaquin Phoenix was great. There's some really impressive shots with tons of extras, but it goes on for a long time. Number 34 is Ferrari. Adam Driver did a great job, but it's very boring most of the time. The racing scenes were okay, but there's some really horrid CGI in them. Honestly, this felt like Oscar bait. Number 33 is Shazam 2. A lot of people hate this movie, but I thought it was fun. I actually really like the characters in these movies, especially Freddy. He is really likable and funny. Honestly, this really reminded me of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy in ways, but this has one of the worst endings I've ever seen. Like, the main character dies, and Wonder Woman shows up for no reason, and they play her terrible theme song in the background. It almost ruined the movie. Number 32 is Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. It has a lot of the elements that made the series great. Really well done action scenes, fun characters, but it really lacked tension. I found myself not really caring about what was going on. At number 31 is Scream 6. I had a lot of fun with this movie. Satire on horror movies is really great, even if it's not really subtle. I love all the characters in this movie. It's a damn shame we will never see them again. Holy shit, there was a ton of great movies this year, but if we're talking about mainstream Hollywood, Hollywood. Holy shit, this year was embarrassing. Most of the big movies flopped. I hope some people watch this video and discover a movie that they'll really love. But yeah, that's it. The video's over. Fuck off.